but it never comes up. All right, here we go. All right, calling to order the August 12, 2019 Parks Board meeting in the City of Chaska. Mary, roll call, please.
All right, Chair Dave Rowan.
Here.
David Downs.
Here.
Ernesto Ruiz Gutierrez. Josh Ives.
Here.
Lauren Mahalov. Patricia Whitrock.
Here.
Sean Olson.
Here.
Jason Branch. Vincent Kim.
Here.
Matt Uderman.
Here.
Elizabeth Wybing.
Here.
All right, terrific. So with that, we're going to go on to item number 3, which is to adopt the agenda. And so trusting that everyone's had a chance to take a look at that. Are there any changes or additions to the existing agenda that anyone would like to discuss? All right, hearing none, I will accept a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move we adopt the agenda.
Okay, Commissioner Whitrock, second.
Second.
All right, Commissioner Uderman, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, so next up we have the visitor presentation, and it does not appear that we've got any visitors here today. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the visitor presentation right now at 7:03. And so moving on from there, approve previous park board meeting minutes, and that's item number 5, and we're just blasting right through our agenda here. So let's take a look at those meeting minutes, and was there anything from those minutes that anyone would like to discuss or question? All right, hearing none, I will accept a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July 8th, 2019 Park Board meeting.
So moved.
All right, Olson, second.
Second.
All right, from Downs. And so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so back to our agenda. And this takes us to agenda item number 6, action items, recommendation to City Council to adopt the Chaska Park naming policy. Marshall.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. So tonight we actually have an action item, huh? Kind of nice. So with this item, talking about the adopting a Chaska Park naming policy, I thought I'd start to provide a little bit of context behind why we're bringing this forward. I'll talk a little bit about the process we went through, and then give an overview of some of the highlights within that policy, and from there I'll turn it over to the Commission for any discussion you would like to have, and then if you're feeling comfortable, we can go ahead and seek a motion to recommend this to City Council. Okay. So park naming policy really came about when I first started here with the City of Chaska. I believe it was the first or second meeting I was in, and we were in the midst of actually renaming a park at that time. It was formerly Veterans Park. And so we had to come up with a process to rename it, of which we ended up with Sunset Park, which was ultimately, I think, a great name. However, it was suggested after that we ought to look at developing more of a formal policy that could give us some more guidelines and structure going forward as it relates to naming and or renaming parks in the future. So that's what we did. Staff have been researching this for a while. A few months ago, we brought forward just an initial draft to the park board. We met in a work session there. We as staff looked at a variety of park naming examples across the country and essentially took bits and pieces that we thought fit here in Chaska. And it was through that process we worked with the park board and got a lot of great feedback and suggestions and ideas. And ultimately we spent 3 work sessions. So the final policy here is version 3.0, essentially. But I think it covers what we wanted to cover. I remember one of the first discussions we had as we were thinking about this is the goal was really to create some guidelines and structure, but also make sure that there's some flexibility within it as well, just knowing that, naming opportunities often are situational, and we didn't want to necessarily put ourselves in a box either. So we factored that in throughout this process as well. So the actual policy was in the packet, and I think one of the first things, that you notice and the public will notice is the opening paragraph. And really that's the intent behind this, and that's making sure we're engaging the community in the process. That was a big piece of, or a big goal of the staff and the park board when developing this policy. So that opening paragraph really sets the tone for the reason behind this, and the purpose is really to establish a systematic and consistent approach for the official naming of parks, recreation areas, and facilities. Goes on to talk about objectives, some of the definitions within it, and then in terms of authorization, again, a reminder that the park board ultimately makes the recommendation, and then that recommendation goes to city council. So city council has the final authority to approve any recommendations on park naming and or renaming. As far as some of the guidelines set forth, one thing I think to note is where we're giving priority. The priority in naming parks really is going to be with geographical or historical type cues that have some significance relating back to the area or Chaska. However, we do have the ability to name it after individuals as well. It's just not the priority. If we want to look at naming something after individuals, first and foremost, if we're honoring somebody that provided great service to the community or whatnot, this policy spells out that they would have to be deceased for a minimum of 6 months before we would consider that. And then there's also language in there that does allow for naming something after a living individual. And that in essence is if there's some sort of land donation in which they're spelling out a deed and putting a provision in there that it's naming it after the individual, or there's some language in there if there's a substantial donation towards the project. And substantial is, left to interpret at the time of consideration and whatever the situation is. So there are provisions in which we can name it after individuals, but again, still we got to revert back. It's not necessarily the priority, but there is the ability. We then talk about the process within the policy, and within the packet, we sort of spell out an example of how that process could look like. So there's an example community notification that we would send out to the public to make them aware that we are looking to name a park. Talks about how it works, and within that communication, we would provide a link back to this particular naming policy, so they're aware of the guidelines within it, so they can factor that into their proposal. And then we have a sample proposal form in which individuals would fill that out. There's room in there for them to submit their ideas. And then more importantly, kind of the meaning and the reason behind the name that they're submitting, along with their connection to Chaska. And that's really just providing a little bit more background for staff and the park board to evaluate the name suggestions that get submitted. And then if there is a proposal in which somebody is recommending it being named after a name or an organization, there's a backside to that form in which they can write a bio on the person or the organization. And then there is a note at the end where if there's any supporting documentation they would like to submit with that proposal, they're welcome to do so. So essentially, the way we see that working, again, it could be situational, but we would make the community aware that we're wanting to name a particular park. We would leave it open for a period of time to submit their proposals. And then those proposals would come into the Parks and Recreation office. Staff would review them just to make sure they're meeting some of the minimum requirements. And then we would submit those proposals forward onto a park board agenda. I think at that point, the process could vary a little bit depending on the number of proposals we receive. If you were to get a lot of proposals, I would think you might want to formulate some sort of subcommittee within the park board to review those and recommend back a set amount for consideration. However, if it's a reasonable amount, the park board could have discussion on those names just at any particular meeting. And then there'd be the public input within that, and then there again, another kind of, I guess, process question that could come about is when you get to a point where you're ready to make a recommendation, if you feel strong you want to make a recommendation on one particular name to the city council, you could do that. Or if there's a couple names that you're really liking, you could direct staff to put that back out to the community and do some sort of voting process. So there's some room for how we do this, depending on the situation. But overall, we have a little bit of a format at least we can go by. And then lastly, within the policy, it talks about renaming existing parks. And so there's some language in there that makes it a little bit more difficult to rename a park, but there is the opportunity to do so for us to be able to consider that. So this will be helpful for the city of Chaska. Looking ahead, we do have definitely a couple of new parks on the horizon. We've got a new neighborhood park that will be coming up shortly over in the Harvest West area within the Southwest Chaska development off of Savannah Way there. And then, as you all know, there's a school referendum that'll be coming forward in which they're seeking a new elementary school over in the Southwest Chaska area, and that site also would include a future neighborhood park. And so that would be another future opportunity to name a park. And then I think just going forward, if there's remodeling of parks, there could be opportunities where we want to consider naming particular facilities within parks if there's unique funding opportunities there. So this policy would lend itself to do those things going forward. So with that, first off, I'll see if there's any questions you have of me. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to the park board to have discussion and go from there.
All right, well, assuming everybody's had a chance to kind of take a look at the final version of what we got here, was there anything from that you feel is worthy of an additional discussion here?
I have a question. I missed the last work session we had on this, so forgive me if this has already been asked and answered, but if the city council adopts this, how binding is this on them? If they decide, hey, we really want to name this park whatever, can they throw the policy away and just name the park what they want to name it? Or if they adopt this policy, does that become somewhat binding on them that this will be the process for every park naming effort going forward?
Yeah, good question. I mean, my hope is that this would be binding in the fact that, the current city council is reviewing this and making the decision to adopt it, and honoring those decisions going forward. you know, would be of the city council. So I think it's, you know, trusting that we've now created a framework to work within. You know, the fact is we're gonna, you know, engage the community in this process. You know, and I always say it's our kind of role to get it forward to the city council and ideally make it an easy decision for them, knowing that there's a process behind it, there's the community support that went into it, you know, to make that an easier decision for them.
Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
At one of the work sessions that we had, we talked about whether we should just have it in the form of this is guidance, or this is a policy that we're presenting, and we agreed at that meeting that it should be a policy to give it a little more teeth. And also, I saw the video on the open meeting law thing, and one of the things that they were saying was good governance is that the city have policies and they follow those policies. You know, that was one of the main issues of that meeting. So I think to address your question, I think it's pretty solid ground that this will be
Yeah, that came up.
followed.
Good.
I think in our work sessions too, we also talked about this isn't taken lightly, because there's a level of permanence when you name a park. And I think that there was one or two remnants, and probably the inspiration for this policy, which was the renaming of Veterans Park that off-seated Schimmelpfennig. And so I just think as a matter of cleanness and policy, probably makes sense to go on the record is to find out what is the status of Schimmelpfennig? Will the next park be named considered Schimmelpfennig? Because I know he delivered a lot of babies, and there was a park named after him at one time, and it's kind of hanging out there. What should the community expect when it comes to that last remnant from the renaming?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I don't know all the history behind what happened then. It was prior to me coming here to Chaska, so I don't know what was exactly promised. You know, it's my understanding, because it seems like the former Veterans Park, it would have been easy to just swap those at that time, but I think there was some reasoning behind not doing that. You know, as a community park, you want it to be a little bit more easier to pronounce and identify and get to, and, you know.
Yeah, there was some discussion, in fact, it was the mayor, I think, that brought it up, that there would be in the future, they'd like to consider using Schimmelpfennig as maybe as a smaller park where you wouldn't have the problems of people trying to put in the name into the GPS system to be able to find the thing, you know? And so I think that's in at least the mayor's future plans, that name be reused if possible, but I think that would fall under this policy too, that if we've got a new park, that would be something that we'd consider in our discussions as well.
Well, I think it's safe to say it's always been a priority of this commission that Schimmelpfennig Park gets renamed someplace.
Right, I agree.
Yep. Yeah, and I think there'll be opportunity within that new community park, you know, whether it's the name of the entire park or if it's an element within it, seems to make sense as at least the next future opportunity. Yep.
So I have a question about, so the policy, it's binding, right? So we gotta follow it. But say some unforeseen problem arises, how hard would it be to revise this policy or replace it?
How hard would it be to revise?
Yeah. Say
Well-
something happened.
Yeah, I mean, you create policies to hopefully cover everything, but like a lot of things, there's certain situations that maybe we didn't account for it, and so I think we would do our best to have that discussion and determine, does it need to revise, is it as such that we need to revise the policy, or is it something that we can just work within at the time, you know? But yeah.
I think we tried to
there'd
build
be
in
the
enough
opportunity.
flexibility that, you know, there isn't gonna be anything in there that's so restrictive that it is gonna kill a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, so, but,
Yeah, I think the flexibility in nature, it reads a little more like a guideline, you know, but we wanted to make sure that it's being put forward as a policy, just so it's being upheld.
All right, any other discussion?
Well, I have one question. Is our official, this volunteer board, is it officially deemed the Park and Recreation Commission? Because I see that being used kind of, and Park Board kind of being used interchangeably.
Yeah, I think technically, according to the commission handbook, it also includes art as well. Yep,
So
but,
our name is the Parks and Recreation Commission?
yep. But I think, yeah,
We frequently say park board.
yeah.
Just kind of casual.
And that's what you look up online. I
Park
look up the park board to be
Right.
able to find the
I was just
minutes and all
curious.
that stuff.
I think this is great, not only for like, for the next 2 or 3 parks, but once we're all inevitably gone in 30 years, people can look back and say, how did they do this then? Or, what sort of process did they follow? So, good.
Well, I think we learned a lot along the way. I mean, I think we were at times surprised by how thoughtful you really had to be on a lot of these things, and there was a lot more detail in trying to really evaluate how you go about making a good decision on these things. And so I think this is going to be a real good thing for us. And
Well,
I
there's
think
a
it's
lot
going
of-
to it's going to serve future commissions.
Yep, and there's a lot of things right in the current news that led to some of our discussion too, with the renaming of Lake Calhoun and,
Right.
some different, University of Minnesota building names, so.
So with that, I guess our park naming policy 3.0 in its existing state, I would entertain a motion for us to go ahead and make a recommendation to the city council to approve that, if somebody wants to make that motion.
I can make it, since nobody else seems to want to. I move that we make a recommendation to the city council that they adopt the City of Chaska park naming policy.
Terrific, and do we have a second?
I second that.
All right, Commissioner Ives, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
One of the things Josh mentioned, I think it's good, is the recollection of how you get to naming these. And then, I know we've had some side conversation, I don't know if we brought it to board or not, is perhaps there's a future mechanism of recording the naming of parks and how they got there. So if you casually walk around town and you ask somebody about Winkle Park, they'll know that he was in part of the public works. But if you talk to somebody that moved to town in the last, say, 10 years, they would have no recollection of that. And so there's a period of time, which we're in right now, that can capture those stories and memorialize those. And I think that this application process allows us to memorialize them more clearly. But I'd encourage us to maybe double click on the parks that are named to capture that. Sunset Park doesn't have a whole lot of name meaning, but some of the existing ones do. Schimmelfennig, like until everything happened in the media, people didn't realize, newer people didn't realize he delivered a bunch of babies.
And he was also, I think, chaired the school
School board.
Yeah.
Right? So I just wanted to offer that on.
But, that's a great idea, and I wonder to what degree maybe even, Chaska Historical Society would have an interest in being a part of that process to get those things recorded, because I think those are great stories.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be sharing with you a little later on in our agenda, a park inventory project we did, and that would be a perfect
Good.
place to share those stories.
All right, terrific, so. See if I can find the tab that gets us back to our agenda, and so that concludes action item number 6, and moves us on to item 7, old business, starting with bike-friendly community updates.
Did you guys vote?
We did.
You did?
And it passed.
Oh, okay. Good. There I was. Okay. I thought you were just having more
Send it back.
discussion, and I was like thinking
Need a
about my next
revision.
item, so, okay, good. So, one thing I was gonna add too is, a next policy that we talked about that we're currently doing some research would be a memorial policy. So I think that'll be some future work for the park board and hopefully in the near future, actually, to look into that a little bit. So, all right, thank you.
All right, yeah.
Can I ask a question on this? When it goes to the city council, is it just you send them a copy of the thing, or is it a discussion point at one of their meetings that you'll present the thing, or somebody else will, and
Yeah, I'll touch base with our city administrator, Matt Podorowski, and, ultimately he'll situate it on the agenda. But hopefully it'll be an actual agenda item where there's some discussion behind it, and I'm happy to give a presentation on it too.
is that normal in something like this, that you would make the presentation to the council of what we did, and just like you did here tonight?
Yep, yeah, either myself or, Matt Podorowski's up to speed on the work we're doing too, and so
Okay.
he could give the background as well.
Or they make it a consent item too, could possibly even go as quickly as that.
Okay.
Okay, now moving on
All
to
right.
number 7 for
7A?
bike-friendly community update, 7A, correct?
All right, so, wanted to recap, last week, Monday, we had a joint work session with the city council to talk about and introduce the whole concept of a bicycle-friendly community, and working with Bike MN, and ideally submitting to receive a designation as a bicycle-friendly community. And also present at that meeting were individuals who have already expressed interest in serving on an active transportation community. Currently, we've got about 20 individuals from a variety of different backgrounds willing to serve on that committee. And so last Monday, we heard from Executive Director from Bike MN, Dorian Griley. He gave a presentation, really good presentation that just sort of talked about what a bicycle-friendly community can mean and the benefits of being a bicycle-friendly community. Then went into kind of evaluating Chaska as we currently are right now. And that was based off of some stakeholder meetings we had held last fall, where we engaged the community and some other business stakeholders. And then he's got recommendations in his current report going forward for us to work on. If you recall, within the bicycle-friendly community designation, there's essentially 6 E categories, in which those are, see if I can remember them all, I'm on the spot here, but engineering, education, evaluation, encouragement, enforcement, yep, and then equity throughout all those. And so there's essentially minimum benchmarks we got to hit within those variety of categories to earn this designation. And really, that's what I like about pursuing this designation is there's a framework that we're working within, and it's a broad spectrum of things to think about when being a bicycle-friendly community. Overall, I think the presentation was well received. There's a lot of good discussion and questions afterwards. My big takeaway, I think, from that meeting was definitely around education. One thing that Dorian talked about was bicycle safety and whatnot really has been missing in the educational system. And so you got literally almost 2 decades worth of people that really haven't experienced that in education. And so that's why you can sort of see some of the tension between bicyclists and motorists out and about in the community. And, so I think there's opportunity there to really provide more education and talk about how we can all coexist, because bicycling is not only recreational, but it can certainly be a major mode of transportation for people. And so we want to make sure going forward, we're just keeping that in mind as we're making changes in the community. But, all those other categories are important too, but it just felt like, at least on the initial conversations out of that meeting, it was a lot of just misinterpretation of things or not understanding of things. And so the more we talked about it, I think you could already see people kind of learning some things and understanding things a little bit more. So, so the next step with that is to bring back that commission, more than likely mid to late September. I think right now a lot of people are in vacation mode, and then we'll be starting up school. Want to give some people some time to settle into new schedules, and then look at hosting a meeting sometime mid to late September.
Likely take place here.
I'm not sure yet, either here or the community center, one of the two. But I think at that meeting, we'll really sort of dive into what all the recommendations are and just start to decide what are the things we want to tackle over the next year. But ideally, we want to work towards some of those recommendations so we can put our best foot forward when submitting our application next year. I think it's about 185 question application. So it'll be a lot of work, but I think it'll be good work, and it'll be another opportunity to really engage a variety of people in the community around a good cause. So looking forward to that.
Is Dorian's report where he made current recommendations, is that available for any of us to look at?
Yep. Yeah, I can email that out. I believe it was in a former park board packet, but it'd probably be just as easy for me to email it back out, and you can look at that again.
Compelling data is shared, even if you're a non-cyclist, for the public health advantage and the economic value for this area. Not only for transportation, but I think he said if you bike 3 times a week, it cuts your chance
2 miles a day, 3 times a week?
Was it heart disease by half?
Yeah.
And so as you look at the future of Carver, the next 20 years shapes the next 200 years. What you're setting as foundation for this helps attract the young families, keeps young families, and may be the best economic tool that we have to attract people and keep them here. So that was fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, you really talked about how that designation, sort of like a kind of a badge on, quality of life for your community, and having that badge can really be an attractor to young families and business owners and things like that into the future. So,
You have to reapply after 4 years, but it isn't as lengthy of a process after the 4 years, is it? You don't have to do the whole thing over, do you?
I don't think so, and I actually learned from Dorian that we wouldn't necessarily need to wait 4 years. I was incorrect on my original thinking on that. I think it's, if we were to get the designation and we wanted to try to move another level up in designation, because they've got multiple levels, there's a 4-year period in which you can move up in your designation. Yep. But if we were to apply and not get the designation, we would get what's called an honorable mention. And with that, though, there would be a scorecard outlining what it is we need to do. And so I think it's more probably just, what's the timeline in implementing some of those recommendations before we would reapply.
Okay.
So I want to give a few more updates. It relates to the bicycle-friendly community, just on the other variety of projects we're working on relating to biking. So the mountain bike trail project, a couple weeks ago, myself, Tim Vosberg, and Dan McCormick, who's a traffic engineer with Carver County that I've been communicating with on this project. The 3 of us went and met with staff at MnDOT at the Roseville location. Really good meeting. Talked through just a variety of punch list items, things that they just wanted a little bit more clarification on. It's my understanding that throughout this process, there may have been a change in some leadership at MnDOT, so they just kind of wanted to sort of revisit the whole scope of this project. So I thought that went well. A result out of that meeting is they did want a couple other departments to review the permit application. But I think they understand that this has been a lengthy process, and Ideally, we should hear back something from them in the near future, ideally with an executed limited use permit. From there, we would then need to apply for a work permit, basically just letting MnDOT know the type of work we would do within that permit area. And then there's still that small piece of right-of-way that Carver County is conveying over to Chanhassen. And so it's been a little while, but we had previous conversation with Chanhassen on how we would then factor that in and work together with the Carver Trails Group to incorporate that into the entire trail system there. So a little bit more progress in regards to the mountain bike trails, which is good. And then the trail wayfinding project. So with that project, currently working with Carver County and the city of Victoria on doing a pilot project for some trail wayfinding. So essentially, we've come up with a loop trail, like a downtown loop trail, as part of that project, and then we've identified a linear trail that would connect downtown Carver to downtown Chaska up to downtown Victoria. And I can actually show that on a map here quick. So this would be the trail that would be the linear one going from downtown Carver. It'd be along the Southwest Regional Trail there. So right here connects into downtown Carver would be the starting point. And then you'd take that Southwest Regional Trail up to the Levee Trail, but then come around into the downtown area. Essentially, you would come in. There is a little bit of a sidewalk section along 5th Street and then over to Pine. And then you would cross at that Hawk System crosswalk there in front of the Curling and Event Center. And then come over to 41 and go north on 41. Essentially up to Victoria, and then you bring Victoria over to Bavaria, go north on Bavaria all the way up to 86th Street, and then go west on 86th, and then north on County Road 11 into downtown Chaska. Victoria, over to the Victoria Flats, which then hooks up to the regional trail going up there. So pretty neat. It's about 9.5 mile section. And I've done a lot of field work to go in and determine, at which point we would need all of our different signs. And then still working though on like what are the different points of interest we would want to put on some of the signs. And then the other, let's see here, the other trail. I'm in my Garmin account here, so it might have logged me out.
Can't handle all those miles you've been biking.
Yeah. Let's see here.
You mentioned a stretch of that's sidewalk. Is there a way to reroute it so it's in a different, safer place, or is that the optimal?
Yeah, that's really the only way there.
I didn't know if Old Creek Road would just take you up right in front of like the VFW.
Yeah. Because part of it too is we want to make sure we're getting points of interest.
Yep.
So there is some intention behind connecting the downtowns on that linear trail. So then this would be the downtown loop trail. And there's some intention here too where this section from Athletic Park kind of over into downtown, you'll be running along both of those trails. So there's going to be a point at 41 where you would need to decide if you're staying on the linear trail to go north or if you're staying on the loop trail. And so that'll be a way for us to sort of determine, is the trail wayfinding working for people? Yeah, so essentially this one follows that same path. However, you would cross 41, kind of go in front of some of the businesses here, and then cut in on the trail. Pretty neat section back in here. You're really in the woods. Feels like you're almost transplanted. You're out here, could be somewhere way up north. Then you cross the road here and then come in through Lions Park. Get to go past the off-leash dog areas. Follow that up. You cross Engler, then you go through the Brandondale trail section here, then essentially you connect right up to the levee trail system. And then you bring that levee all the way back around. It's a lot of cool trail section here. The only thing about this trail is it's susceptible to under 41 is where it typically floods in the spring.
Just bring some variety to it.
Yeah, so, people will just have to learn, they can then cut up here, they'll just have to go up to First Street, cross at the light, and then come back around, and then they can connect that way. But we're gonna use color codes to start. That downtown loop is gonna be the orange loop, and then the linear trail, we're gonna call that the green line. So sort of thinking about how light rail uses color systems. I know they have that here in Minnesota, but even especially like in Chicago, a lot of people really reference where they're going based on if they're on the red line, green line, so people can start to associate that way. We're just going to see if that works. So Carver County is actually contracted with a research company that's going to be out on these trails once the signage is up. They'll actually be surveying the users on the trails and getting feedback. So throughout this process, Carver County's realized that there's only one other entity that's ever done actually surveying or a research project on wayfinding. And that was several years ago over in Hawaii. So I think it'll be really neat to get some of that feedback and incorporate that into what we want to do into the future.
And you mentioned signage, there's gonna be a app that's gonna be able to handle this, so people can see it on their phone when they're riding?
Yeah, so currently, we already have, within Chaska's website, there, and I can go in there too, there is an interactive trail map built in there. The next step that we really need to do is, ideally, I would want to overlay that with the specific colors on these two trail, like, pilot projects. That's not currently done yet, but I'll be working on that.
Great.
Otherwise, no, these will be actual like signs that we attach to light posts and whatnot. We're really able to utilize a lot of existing structure that's already out there to install these signs. In addition to the signs, if it makes sense, depending on the timeline, we may even get a head start by spray painting some stencils on the trails, just to get people out there and get familiar with these trail sections. And then lastly, as it relates to biking, the recreation department's working on planning a community bike event. That's slated for Sunday, September 29th. The idea there is to attract a variety of bikers, so we'll have a kid-friendly or family-friendly bike ride. Everything would start out of Athletic Park, and they'd actually use kind of that southern portion of that downtown loop trail. And families that can make it, they can go all the way over to Lions Park. We'd have some activities at Lions Park, and then they could come back around that same way. I think it's about 8 miles there and back. We'd also try to get a group of road riders and do some sort of out and back or loop road bike, and then we would try to get some mountain bikers to go out and do rides. Essentially, these groups would just go out and do their respective rides, but then come back and have some food and entertainment, some other bike vendors, things like that. So stay tuned for that. And that's it for the bicycle-friendly update.
Okay, any additional questions or comments on that? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item 7B, Lions Park off-leash dog area update.
All right. So just wanted to keep everybody up to speed, you know, on some of the discussions we had had previously and the things that we said we were going to do. And that was a couple of things. We wanted to make sure we're creating more awareness on site at the off-leash dog area, that there is the second area back in the woods across the bridge. And so we've done that. We've installed a sign now that's right near the entry point to the first kind of open grassy area. So that sign literally informs, you can't miss it. I did have pictures, but for some reason I'm not able to open the JPEGs tonight. But it's nice size blue sign that informs people that there's another area across the bridge and to the right. I think it mentions that it's 5-acre wooded trails and that it's fenced in. So I think that's been a good addition. And then secondly, we've got right next, currently we've always had a document holder attached to the fencing that has the dog license forms for people to grab. Right next to it, we've got another document holder that now contains dog park etiquette and then dog behavior kind of warning signs. So really good educational piece. One came from an article through WebMD that kind of gives people some good things to think about when bringing their dog to a dog park. And then the other one is from a professional dog trainer association that sort of has the green, yellow, and red kind of warning signs on different behaviors of dogs and how they're expressing themselves. So those are going to be available on site for people to take and learn a little bit more. We're also working with the communications department to get that up on the website too. So I think those couple of things ideally will continue to just educate people the fact that we have 2 spaces, you know, and then continue to educate people just about proper use of those spaces and things to keep in mind.
Have we gotten any other complaints or concerns from the public in the last month or 2 since we last talked about it?
I have not.
Okay.
All right, any other questions or comments for Marshall on the off-leash dog park?
Is there a plan that, are we going to go out and entertain questions or suggestions from the public at some point in time for potential improvements after the dog park's been in existence for so long or something?
Yeah, I think we said let's wait till that 1-year mark and then.
Yeah, we talked about some, is that still in the offing that we're
Yeah,
gonna try to do something?
I think that seems reasonable. Once we're up and running for a year to loop back and get people's feedback and see what they think. Yep, so that would probably be, I think, October frame, somewhere in there. So, October, November.
All right, terrific. Thank you, Marshall. And so we'll go ahead and close out agenda item 7, move on to 8, which is receive council meeting minutes from June 17th and July 1st. And I expect that you've all had a chance to review those council minutes. And was there anything in those that
There was one item in the first one, June 17th. At the very end where the council members are making comments, the mayor mentioned something about Nick Mason's scholarship. And in there, he said it was scholarship for adaptive park equipment. That wasn't my understanding of what the foundation was for.
Yeah, I think that might have just been a
Misunderstanding or something?
misunderstanding within the way the notes were written, but yeah, it could be for that. It's got the ability to be for that, but it's also much more broader than just that. It could be, it's intended for people that may not have the financial means.
Right, that was my impression of what it was gonna be. Is there,
Yep.
is that been put out yet? Did I miss that while I was on vacation or something? Has there been something put out to explain what that is and
Not quite
solicit
yet.
donations?
We're still figuring out the mechanisms to make sure that we're administering it appropriately. So one of the requirements is we have to form a committee. So that's still in the works. We also gotta, develop some kind of guiding criteria on how we're gonna decide. So there's some things we gotta do, and then also, we wanna give it some time for the fund to actually develop too. So there's been some initial influx, on behalf of Nick Mason, and then, his wife and son are also, at that city council meeting, came forward and said they're gonna contribute $5,000 towards it, which is really good. But I met with Nick Mason's wife, and she's gonna help out quite a bit, and was willing to serve on this committee, and ideally we wanna seek some grant opportunities going forward and things like that, so there's still some kind of behind-the-scenes work, because this developed pretty quickly. And then from there, we would get the message out more that it's available, but we want to make sure we have the, I guess, means behind and the system intact before we start awarding it.
But you haven't started soliciting funds at this point, or have you?
No, so right now, we've mainly just been relying on the memorial donations.
Is that something that the park board should be involved in? Should that be maybe an agenda item for the next meeting, or is that something that's out of the purview of the board? Is that something that just goes on in the standard mechanisms of the Park and Recreation Department without involving the board?
That's a good question. What type of involvement could you see the park board having with that? Or-
Well, I was thinking specifically of, if you wanted input on, soliciting donations, or input on, criterion for, awarding something.
Yep,
But if you've got a committee already
Yeah.
that's gonna do that kind of stuff, we may well just be redundant in the whole process if that was the case. So maybe it's not a good idea for us to,
well, and the committee hasn't been formed yet, and so that could be a potential if there was interest on the park board of somebody wanting to serve on that committee, I think that'd be a great idea.
but not, the park board wouldn't be involved as a board. It would just be a member who might go and sit on that where the decisions are made.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
And I think it'd be fair every now and then to give a report on how that fund is doing and
Yeah,
what we're able to do with it.
yeah,
so.
just out of interest, it would be nice to have some kind of follow-up on it. Not necessarily every meeting, but when it's appropriate. when I
Yep.
think it's appropriate.
Yeah, so as we formulate a little more detail on what that committee looks like, I can certainly reach out and see if there's any interest.
I love the thought of a park feature that's legacy or memorial, as you alluded to earlier, in the possible work session. This feels like it fits into that realm of legacy, where there's dollars or a memorial or an honor for someone. Do you see these as separate work streams, or maybe one work stream?
I think some sort of memorial sort of park feature or element or plaza, I know we've talked about that. I think it plays off of this because it gets us thinking about it. But I think this actual you know, this is more meant for, you know, funding to then develop scholarships ongoing for people to participate in activities and programs that they might not otherwise be able to participate in for whatever reasons. So, but I think they go together, essentially.
All right, any other questions or comments related to the meeting minutes from the city council? All right, moving on to item number 9, staff reports.
All right.
9A, department happenings.
All right, so first thing I want to highlight is that park inventory project that I had mentioned. So one thing we're doing, we've been doing for, I would say at least the last 6 months or so, is revamping the community center website. So essentially, as we sit, the community center website is on its own platform. It's actually separate from what the city of Chaska's website platform is. The current platform of the community center, on the back end, they're no longer going to support it. And so we're actually working towards moving all of our information and housing it within the city of Chaska's website. So we'll have that same platform. What that's really doing is requiring us to go through and get all of our content within the current website up to speed. So a lot of good conversation among staff, so that when we make that transfer, it'll be a lot easier. One thing that we've noticed as we were looking into it is within the Parks and Recreation section, there just was not a lot of good information related to our parks. I think there was essentially a PDF document that listed all the parks and then had some of the amenities, and that was really about it. And so the idea was that we thought of was developing a little bit more of a park inventory, and we thought, boy, wouldn't it be nice if there was an intern that could take this on. And I think they call it the law of attraction when you think about something, and then it all of a sudden, a week later, I get an email from a student from St. Cloud looking to do an internship. And her area of focus is within environmental sciences. So she's as passionate about anything to do with the outdoors. Her name is Rebecca Gleason, and so we interviewed her and talked about this project to see if it would be of interest, and she wanted to tackle it. So her, along with Susan Merrick. Susan Merrick is one of our staff who focuses on software and a lot of technology within our department. Really worked with this intern on this project, and so happy to share with you where that or what the result is. So underneath Parks and Recreation, if you go under Parks and Locations, we've now got a full park inventory that's laid out as an interactive story map. And so within it, it incorporates our new vision and mission, gives a little bit of background on the all of the entire system. There is, if you click here, the Parks Amenities Summary. We revamped that, but that's essentially what was available before, was just that document. Then you scroll down to the park system overview. And so on this map, sort of see where everything falls. We split it into quadrants as it relates to the neighborhood parks, utilizing 41 and 212. And then the red circles would be the community parks, the blue circles are neighborhood parks, and then the yellow stars, those are our major facilities. And so then you just see, moving on down to neighborhood parks, recreation facilities. And then it goes into the detail within each of those. So athletic park, when you get to athletic park, you see the picture, you got a map indicating where it is within the city of Chaska, you got the features within it, and then a description. So this is what I was talking about, getting the stories behind the parks. We could easily add to these variety of existing parks once we get the history. Then you can click on gallery. There we go. And then it brings you, I think it automatically scrolls. You give it a little bit of time. Otherwise, you can just click on through. And then if you're out and about somewhere and you need to know how to get there, you can click on it. Oh, that's the aerial view. However, if you click on the pin, that'll bring you into Google Maps, and then you can navigate to any said park. And then we've got links to the Downtown Chaska Business Alliance website, and then the Chaska Historical Walking Tour, which is another story map. But essentially, it goes through every park. And then parks that do have a reservable picnic shelter, we got a link built right in, and it takes you to the shelter reservation page to make reservations.
Love it.
It's really nice.
It's really good.
Impressive.
That's great.
Can you go back to the place where it's got the different numbers for the different parks
Oh.
on the map
Yeah.
near the beginning? You've got, I love the difference in the colors, but you duplicate numbers from one to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had it happen to me some years ago, is that we were looking at a little map, and it had numbers and circles, and they had historical things to look at were in the black circles,
Mm-hmm.
and hotels and restaurants were in the white. And we focused in on the wrong color for the circuit, for what we were looking for, and we drove around and around in circles trying to find the thing. So you may want to think about changing the numbers so they're not duplicates. Leave the colors certainly, but also have, 1 through 8, the parks inventory that you've got there. The next one you start off, or 1 through 9, the next one you start off with, but
Yeah.
Bavaria Park is 10 or something.
Okay.
Yeah, or you could do a triangle or a square instead of another
Alphanumeric.
circle.
Yeah, maybe the yellow stars could be letters rather than numbers or something, but we'll give that some thought. Yeah, so essentially it does that for all of the major parks, and then when you get down to the neighborhood parks, we don't get, there's not as much detail there. So it just talks about the northwest neighborhood parks, and it is mainly more just an inventory listing, and then the pin to be able to navigate to it.
Is that printable?
That's a good question.
Because Brooklyn and I have gone to all the 31 city parks, which is kind of fun. I can't tell you the amount of people that have requested, "Can you have that list? Can I go see that list?" And then when you put it on a map, you have to create your own route. You're like, well, I'm in this area, I'm grabbing a bite to eat here, let's just go to this park.
Mm-hmm.
It would be really helpful if it could be printable and shareable, because I know young families that are looking for something to do. What a great adventure. We made ours into a checklist. And it looks like it's all there. I just don't know if it can be rendered in a PDF that you can share and print.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll look into that.
Maybe even, you could share it at Touch a Truck.
Yeah. Wow, that's,
Aggressive.
It's ambitious.
I want to get down to the bottom here. So then we also incorporated public art and monuments. So there's a description on the different monuments throughout Chaska. And then a couple of the natural habitat and wetland restorations within Chaska as well. So really cool. Just got to give kudos to both Rebecca and Susan for all the work that they put into this.
It is
I
very
think
cool.
it's, you know, this is now a living website, so we can certainly make changes and edits over time, and as we grow and do different things, this is kind of the inventory now for us to maintain on the website.
That's a big project. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds easy, just inventory this one city's parks, but I mean, that's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she went out and spent quite a bit of time at all these parks, and obviously getting those features, she had to count all the parking spaces, and we got the detail for like the length of the fields and all that. So it'll really be a really good resource internally as well, you know, for just different inquiries we get and people wanting to rent things. People from out of state wanting to come to a tournament and want a better understanding of what our fields look like and whatnot, so.
Is this usable in what you do outside of this room to showcase to new people?
I mean,
potential?
it's certainly like, it seems more in depth than I've seen other cities have, or at least locally, about their parks. I mean, I don't see many tell like a story like that. It's more like, hey, this is the location and,
Yeah.
but it's, I can see it being useful.
Yeah. Yeah, so I encourage you to all go in there and just dive in a little bit more and look at all the pictures and the detail within it. And then if you've got any other suggestions as you are doing that, feel free to let us know. Okay.
Anything else under department?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight the fact, you know, last July and the first part of August has been busy with a lot of community events. We had the AOA Pie Special, we had the AOA Picnic, we had the Peace in the Park, we had the Bark in the Park, and throw in our Fire and Ice Festival in there as well. Staff have been very busy engaging the community. Fire and Ice Festival, that's our big one every year. We definitely had some challenges with weather this year. If you recall, Friday night was like 115-degree heat index. It was humid. It was pretty tough. I give kudos to the band that was still up there playing and running around, having fun. Interestingly enough, though, as the sun went down that night, it cooled off just enough, and quite a few people started coming. But it sort of felt like the party was getting started, and we had to end a little short, but that was just the way it played out. And then Saturday, major thunder and rainstorms all morning into the early afternoon. So a lot of the afternoon family activities got canceled, but it cleared up and became a beautiful night Saturday night. Couldn't have asked for anything better. And had a really good turnout for the music lineup there. A lot of people playing the corn toss and whatnot, so it's fun to see. And then Sunday had a good turnout as well with the family fun run and the fishing event. So, provided the weather, it was still a really good turnout. Let's see. I was going to mention our new activities guide is out, so if you get a chance, take a look at that. You may have noticed that there's a little bit of a new look to the cover. We actually added our new vision statement as sort of a tagline onto the cover, so that'll be consistent going forward. We now feature some of our main events within the cover, and just trying to create a little bit more branding with our cover going forward, and encouraging staff to utilize more pictures highlighting Chaska. Oh, what happened there?
Well, I got you set so you can put that on there to show the public.
Oh, perfect.
There you
So yeah, just trying to incorporate more pictures of Chaska where possible. I think in the past, a lot of clip art was used, and so, and even within it, you know, ideally trying to highlight the actual participants in our programs throughout the activity guide.
Does anybody care to guess where that picture was taken?
You know?
I think I do. I think I recognized. I think it's McKnight Park there at that second link of Lake Grace, just on the north side of Pioneer Trail.
Yeah. Yeah, and our recreation program manager, Aaron Link, took that picture. So
Okay.
kind of cool. Looking ahead, as Commissioner Uterman said, Touch a Truck coming up this Thursday. That'll be from 5 to 7:30 at the parking lot of the community center there. Another great community event. I believe we are still seeking some volunteers to serve hot dogs, so if you are available that night, stop on by. We've also got a movie in the park coming up on Wednesday, August 21st, over at Fireman's Park, so check that out. Another exciting thing within the Curling and Event Center, next year, in 2020, we're going to be hosting a U.S. junior curling camp. It's actually one of the largest curling camps in the nation. It's going to be hosted right here at our facility, so that's going to be bringing in families from all over the place for an entire week to explore Chaska. Last week, we finished up interviews for the full-time position at the Curling and Event Center. That's going to be an evening and weekend Curling and Event Center coordinator position, just to extend the level of customer service across our operating hours there. And then lastly, I wanted to mention, a while back, you had heard a presentation regarding Park Run from an individual that started that up in Egan. We're going to do an informal park run on Saturday, September 7th at 9 o'clock. And that's going to be located at the trailhead right off of Beach Street, just out from the government center there on the Levee Trail. There's a trailhead there. So nice spot on a Saturday. There's plenty of parking at the government center there, or along the residential streets. We'll meet at that trailhead, and we're actually going to run maybe east. It'll be an out and back 5K. So the idea is to really create this event, create some excitement, get some people there. We still need to get a willing volunteer that wants to head up the park run and just be the main organizer and coordinator. So hopefully that will come about from this event we host and just keep the momentum going. But there's also, if you're not aware, there is a Facebook group page now called Let's Bring Park Run to Chaska. So you can look that up in Facebook and help promote it that way if you would like. But you'll see more information and marketing coming out to try to get people to go to that. And it's at 9 o'clock in the morning, so one of the things, if you recall, Park Run is for all people of all abilities, and it's actually really not geared towards the real hardcore runners. And you'll see a lot of Park Run sites, they offer them a little bit later in the morning, you know, so people can get up and have a little breakfast and wake up a little bit before they exercise. That's it.
All right, so that closes out staff reports and moves us on to agenda item number 10 for other business. I see 10A here is identifying a conflict for our September 9th Park Board meeting.
That is correct. So due to Labor Day, the city council will be meeting on that September 9th. So my thought is we will not have a regular meeting that evening, but we'll look to have a work session. Ideally, I'd like to take the park board out and about and visit a couple other parks. I had mentioned a couple of the future parks that are up and coming. I think that could be a good use of our time to go out and see where that future neighborhood park is going to be, along with the future community park. And then I could entertain just any other type of discussion we may want to have while we're together as well. But that being said, I wanted to see what would be an ideal time for a work session that night. It wouldn't necessarily, we wouldn't need to worry about the regular meeting. So my thought was 6 o'clock, give people time to have some dinner and then go out. That work?
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds good.
All right. So what I'll do is, sometime within the next week or two, I'll email something out with some more specifics, but more than likely we'll plan on 6 o'clock meeting at the community center where we have Parks and Recreation bus, and then we can all go, I'll be your bus driver that night.
Could we squeeze in a visit to the park, the dog park? I know
Yeah,
it's been
the
hot,
off-leash dog area?
because we'll be real close to there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea.
Okay, so moving on, in other business, this is typically where we would have our roundtable discussion. Elizabeth, Commissioner Weinveen, do you have anything to share?
I guess I just want to follow up on Marshall's talking about
For the microphone?
I just want to follow up on the Marshall's talking about the activity book. I hope everybody has had a chance to see it. I geeked out when it arrived to my house. There's so many fun events and classes, and I hope that everybody in the community takes advantage of it. There's so many things of different interest levels, age groups, and it makes me really proud to be part of Chaska with all that we offer. So kudos to your department.
Good.
Commissioner Ives?
Not much. I went to the community center to work out today for the first time in several years. So the transformation has begun. So I'm excited.
Commissioner Olson?
I got a question about the fitness center, coincidentally. So, my daughter made, this is sort of largely out of self-interest. My daughter made a club softball team, and they train throughout the winter. And part of the expectation is she's supposed to be able to work out and do some things over the summer, but she's 13. So she cannot use, under the CCC rules, she can't use the fitness center because she's not 15, even if we're there as a parent supervising her. And I've checked around with some neighboring communities, and Eden Prairie and Minnetonka and Shakopee will all let 12-year-olds and up use their fitness center as long as they're accompanied by an adult, and they go through an orientation on the equipment. And so I was wondering if that was maybe just something we could look into and see if that's maybe a policy where we could come into alignment with some of the other cities, or if there's a specific reason that we're not, just so we could, get some full usage out of our membership there, so.
Yeah. So the good news is we are already looking into that.
Good.
So
Okay.
we're doing a full review of all of our policies at the community center. And that one specifically, we'll be looking towards moving to a 12-year-old as a minimum age. So in addition, we're just looking at trying to streamline some of our policies. It's quite the unique facility and how large it is, and every area tends to have different policies, and so it can get confusing for the user, though. So we're trying to figure out where we can, to some degree, just kind of meet in the middle and create some consistency throughout the facility. But you're correct, in the fitness industry, 12 years of age has been the norm now for quite some time, so we're a little behind there. So it's more just about, you know, we're wanting to review all of our policies and kind of present a new package, so to speak, and then time it with, you know, a new activity brochure. So I'm anticipating at the beginning of the new year, somewhere in there.
Okay,
Yep,
all right, sounds good.
yeah.
That's all I got.
All right, Commissioner Kim.
Fall sports are starting up just again. I think a lot of them started up today, at least for the high school. And I'm really excited. It's going to be a lot of fun this upcoming season. And also, I'm really glad to see that the dog parks are starting to work out again. And it's nice to see a lot of community involvement and seeing people come out for things that they care, whether it's sports or pets or works. That's it.
Excellent. Commissioner Downs.
I don't have anything. You know, kudos to your department too for all the good work. You know, it seems like things are going really well now, and you guys are busier than ever. And you know, you always want to give a job to a really busy person because you know they'll get it done, and you seem like you can do more and more all the time. Good work for the department.
Thanks.
Someone approached me and asked if there would be any possibility that the Parks and Rec could look into offering bocce ball. All you need is another activity. But she said in some communities it's very popular, and I don't know much about it, to be honest with you. So I said I'd bring it up.
Yes, I will forward that on to Zach. He is our new kind of sports league supervisor, but I think it's a great idea. We'll see if we can fit that in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Uterman.
So I love when people use the parks, and City Square Park gets a lot of utilization, a couple call-outs. I think River City Days happened between now and the last time we met. And so Dr. Tim and Pasha did a great job of organizing that, and it was alive and great. Music in the Park is something down there, and just this past weekend, Scott Bradley spearheaded a group of Korean War veterans and honored those guys. It was a rainy day, but it was a car show, and there was a lot of people out there utilizing the amenities for veterans, particularly Korean War veterans. Sunset at the town course, if anybody's looking to squeeze the best out of summer and into the fall. Great sunsets up at the town course. It's great utilization up there. Call out to Rebecca and Susan for their work on that park stuff and diving into the amenities. That's great. And then Athletic Park's another favorite. Not only have the Cubs had a lot of success, but Lenzen Night is always a success. There was a bunch of people out there unofficially, like 1,500, 1,600 people came for Lenzen Night, which is one that we enjoy as a family. And then I think that Park saved the day. There was a couple of older gals that came to town. They wanted to be part of the occasional shops. And they were dismayed that there's not a lot of occasional shops open on Monday and Tuesday in Chaska, and somebody suggested that maybe they check out Excelsior because they have a vibrant downtown area. And somebody said, well, maybe you should talk to that guy. He's on the park board. And so I was able to grab the save, send them up to Fireman's Park. They ended up actually having dinner or lunch, I think it was lunch, at the Curling Center. They came back to Dunn Brothers to grab an afternoon cup of coffee. I was still there. And they said that they were so glad that we showed them that Fireman Park was here. And so getting the word out there, and I'm sure they went on to Excelsior in the afternoon, but what would have been a bust, and I didn't realize it, but there's so many people that come to Chaska for the occasional shops. There's some retirees that actually make Chaska a destination during the week, and they've discovered our parks, and they're becoming more and more a draw. And then the last thing is we're really hoping to make Touch a Truck on Thursday. My wife's due on Thursday. So I asked, I know it's really selfish, but I asked that she wait till after 7 o'clock so that we can go to Touch a Truck.
I think that's fair.
You're handing out hot dogs.
So I'm hearing that it's unanimous that we have to wait till at least 7
I'll
o'clock
make a
on
motion.
Thursday.
Oh, that's dedication.
Yeah, so there's where we're at.
All right, well, it bears repeating, I think, to really call out Susan Merrick and Rebecca Gleason for the work they did on the Chaska Park inventory. That's just really impressive. And so, yeah, big call out to them for their great work there. And then Touch a Truck, the happiest day in Chaska. It is every year, and I'm sure there's gonna be a huge turnout again this year. Hopefully, I haven't seen the weather report, but
I think it's good.
it's no doubt gonna be good.
looking
So,
nice so
at any
far.
rate, it's just a terrific event, and it's the one time a year, and I actually live a quarter mile to the north of the community center there, and we get cars parked in front of our house for that. And that just goes to show, just how popular that really is, and we'll be serving up a lot of hot dogs, as we always do. It's kind of 2 hours with your head down in the assembly line, but they're fun to serve, and it's a terrific day, so looking forward to this Thursday. And that is all I've got. Is anything from staff or any final comments here? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All right, Commissioner Uderman, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, from Commissioner Olson, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned.